talk today about getting the most out of your email strategy. We're going to talk about some opportunities. We're going to talk about some best practices. We're going to talk about stuff to test and try. We're going to talk about surveys, lots of fun stuff today. But first, I want to lead off with just kind of a big picture thought, which is that email is still one of the biggest opportunities in the digital space. I'm amazed that it's 2023, almost 2024, that we're still talking about email. I get the question at every panel, at every talk, everywhere I go, email really in 2023? And yet email is this incredible tool that continues to work and that just about every publisher, big and small, can get more out of. So I want to give you some resources today to help you figure out how to get the most out of your email strategy. Today we'll talk about why email matters. We'll talk about some best practices that you're going to want to implement. We're going to talk about some opportunities for new products, for growth, for surveys. And as Joyce mentioned, we'll save some time for Q&A at the end. First, let's talk a little about briefly who I am. Don't want to spend too much time on that. Joyce mentioned. I'm Dan. I used to be the director of newsletters at both BuzzFeed and The New Yorker. At BuzzFeed, it was about growth. A big part of the pitch actually at BuzzFeed, I just found a notebook from the weeks before I started that job at BuzzFeed in 2012, when BuzzFeed was this pretty small sort of indie operation, maybe like 150, 175 people, one office in New York, before it grew into this behemoth of an organization. And one of the rules that I jotted down around why I thought email would work at BuzzFeed was, well, email would allow us to get directly to readers and get gatekeepers out of the way. What would happen if Facebook or if Google or if Twitter changed the rules? What would happen then? And a lot of you are here today because, well, Canada is a living example of what happens when the rules get changed. What do you start to look to? You start to look towards tools like email as a way to reach people directly. In 2019, I left my job. I am, to date, I think the only person in New Yorker history to leave their job because their newsletter got too popular. Not the usual path for folks leaving the New Yorker. Left in 2019, started a consultancy, been working with folks all over the world, including a number of newsletters and organizations up in Canada. Today, let's talk a little about why email matters. Let's start there. And I always love to start with this photo. This is of an old colleague of mine, Deborah Knapp. My first job out of college, I graduated from the University of Missouri, and I got a job at a TV station in San Antonio, Texas. I was part of a team there that was building out a website. For the first time, they had a website. They had this joint venture with the newspaper in town. They split off. Suddenly, they had to build a website for the first time, figure out how to publish for the web. I was part of the team that was in charge of helping figure out what that would look like, how to build it, how to train our reporters to write for the web. And I got to work with amazing people like Deborah. This is a photo of her in the 1980s when she was part of what was then the most watched TV newscast in America. 60% of TVs that were turned on at 6 p.m. in San Antonio watched Deborah and her colleagues deliver the news. They had this amazing rapport with each other. They had amazing banter. People just really connected with them in a really cool way. And I got to see it years later when I was there. San Antonio, if you've never been, is a really big, small town. It's this place with 1 million people, but it feels like everybody knows everybody. There'd be events and parades, and our staff people like Deborah would be out in the community, at a parade, an event, talking with folks. I was amazed at how often people would just come up to folks like Deborah and just start talking to them as though they'd known them for years. And often I would ask, you just had a pretty animated conversation with that person. Do you know them? And they would say, no, but they know us because we're on in the living room. When people are waking up, the TV's on, they're eating breakfast, the TV's on, they're watching us do the news. They watch us during dinner or when they go to bed. They invite us into their homes every day. And so even though we don't know them, they feel like they know us. They have this kind of unusual relationship with us. And what I learned with email when I started getting into this space was that email had a very similar sort of power to broadcast. You had the ability, because this inbox is this digital living room, to get directly to people in a place they check every single day. And now, thanks to phones, a couple times a day. The Inbox is this place where your subscribers let you in alongside family and friends and maybe another news organization or a brand they like. And what's really fun is it's not just a broadcast channel. It can actually be a place where you can start real conversations with your audience. This is my first newsletter that I ever launched back in, I believe it was 2011 or 2012. It was called Tools for Reporters. And it's still going today, toolsforreporters.com. A fellow grad at the University of Missouri took it over a few years ago and has been doing awesome things with it. And there are people on that email list who have been on it for a dozen years since the very beginning. What I discovered with Tools for Reporters was when I would put something on a social channel, I'd post something to Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, nothing would happen. I had a few hundred followers in each of those platforms, nothing would happen. But I would send an email out to 400 or 500 people, and I would get dozens of replies, questions. People said, "Oh, I saw the thing that you pushed out today. Have you tried this tool? Hey, I'm going to be up in New York. I'd love to meet. I'd love to connect. I have a question for you about X, Y, or Z." I was amazed at how powerful email could be because people could talk back to you and you could start to really build relationships. And it's on the screen here. The algorithmic part is huge. There isn't really an algorithm in the way between you and your readers. There's no one who could say one day, "I've decided that I don't want to show your content anymore." Email is unusually democratic. There's so many different players in the email space, literally thousands of different players that help you get your newsletter to your reader. And so there's no one company that can just say, "Oh, we've decided we don't like your newsletters. See you later." So if you get an email address, you get to build a relationship for the long haul. There's also this thing that we talked about a lot at Condé Nast when I was at the New Yorker. Email is this cross-functional tool. So it plays when I say cross-functional, what I mean is every part of your organization. At Condé, that was marketing and sales, editorial, consumer revenue, events. We could get them all in the same room to work together on email because email mattered to everybody. It's unusual in that respect. Usually with a tool, with a certain platform, it matters to one or two teams. Email matters to everybody. It helps drive traffic, grow your audience, build habit. If you have a subscription, it can help you convert readers and keep readers. And so it makes it an unusually powerful tool. You see it with big organizations and small ones, even independent writers who have their own newsletters. Email does a lot of different things for anyone. And the revenue part is huge. When I got the job at the New Yorker, I'd like to believe it's that they looked at the newsletters that I launched at BuzzFeed, such prestigious and important products as This Week in Cats, a real newsletter that I pitched on my first day and they laughed at. And we grew to 150,000 readers. We also did serious newsletters too, but I'd like to think that This Week in Cats, they looked at that and went, "Oh, this is the perfect product for the New Yorker." But the truth was they had done some research and they said, "We realized that the number one way we get casual readers to become paying subscribers of the New Yorker is if we get them on our daily newsletter. They start to read a lot. They hit the paywall. They go, the New Yorker is great. Let's read more of this. Let's pay for it." And they didn't really have a clear strategy around how to build and grow and sustain a newsletter strategy. So they brought me on to help figure that sort of thing out. And I've seen this with just about every organization that I work with in the US and Canada, around the world. Email is the number one way people take casual readers and get them to pay for something, a subscription, a donation, get them to come to events. Email is just really, really important for keeping readers happy, for converting them, and then once they paid, for making sure that they stay supporters for a long, long time. So how I've laid out the slides today and the presentation today is kind of into 4 big sections. I want to talk about things that I want you all to think about launching, fixing, trying, and testing. When it comes to email, there is a lot to do. I have done versions of these sessions that have been multiple days. I did one in Copenhagen in 2022. That was a 3-day workshop, and we didn't even get to all the topics we wanted to get to in 3 days. Trying to do it in 50 minutes is a lot, but I want to try to boil it down to just a few things that I think everybody should launch, fix, test, and try. Again, a lot that you could do. Let's talk about these 4 key pillars. First off, stuff to launch. Let's start with the products that you all are putting out into the world, the actual newsletters. So many of the organizations that are here today and organizations that I work with around the world, They've had newsletters maybe for a while, but they usually look something a little like this. There's some sort of traffic driving product. It's some sort of daily product every day. Here's a list of headlines, and we're going to push these stories out into the world and get you to click back to the website. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with having a traffic driving newsletter or multiple traffic driving newsletters. But there are other opportunities out there that might be worth considering and bringing to your email strategy. One of these is what I call destination newsletters. These are newsletters where the reading experience takes place pretty much entirely inside the inbox. Sometimes there are clicks out, but the goal is, hey, if you open the email, you're going to get a lot of good stuff right there in the inbox. There's lots of great examples. I love this newsletter from Puck. They have a few different ones. They cover New York, DC, San Francisco, and LA. So they cover finance, media, they cover Silicon Valley, they cover Hollywood. And if you're on one of their newsletters, a couple times a week, you get these really long, really well-reported columns and reporter notebooks that show up in your inbox. The best stuff comes right to you exclusively for paying subscribers. It's really cool and super powerful. It's one of the only newsletters actually that I consistently read on a weekly basis. Their stuff's really good. I loved how The Peak, which is a Canadian newsletter covering business news, they just sold earlier this year for $5 million Canadian, which is pretty cool. They started in 2020. 3 years later, sold for $5 million, which is pretty impressive. And their thing was all the best business news there in your inbox every single day. Summarize it for you, make you smarter. You want to think about stuff like alerts. These could be tied to things like breaking news. Certainly this is from the Globe and Mail. Great example here. But you also may want to think about alerts tied to some sort of habit building product. At the New Yorker, something that we learned pretty early on was we had this crossword puzzle that we launched when I was there. The New Yorker hadn't had a crossword puzzle before. People weren't in the habit of playing our crossword puzzle. They were in the habit of playing the crossword puzzle for the New York Times, which had been around for 100 years, but not ours. So the question was, how are we going to build the habit of getting people to play this thing a couple times a week? And the simple answer was, we'll launch a newsletter. If you played the puzzle, we'd have a little pop-up that showed up and say, hey, you want to play the next one of these? Did you like this? Sign up for our newsletter. We'll send you an alert every time we publish a new puzzle. And what we realized was there was a really loyal audience that played that thing a couple times a week. They got the email, they went to our website, and they were spending 10, 12, 15 minutes on our website every week playing the puzzle. Then what we learned was that the people who played the puzzle, who were paying subscribers, were highly unlikely to ever cancel. They loved our newsletters, they loved our content, and then there was this one other thing they loved, our puzzle. And because they were getting these reminders to play it every week, they were actually doing that. And these readers basically never churned. They were going to stay with us forever. And so that email was super, super powerful as a tool for retention. I want to talk for a second about courses because these are really fun. I did my first one of these at BuzzFeed. It was almost a decade ago. We launched a newsletter called the 7-Day Better Skin Challenge. Every day, one simple tip to help you look your best. They did so well, we translated them to other languages. We did ones around health, around fitness, around cooking, cleaning, all sorts of fun things. We called these courses. They were an automated series of emails, kind of built like a welcome series. So when you took some sort of action, you signed up, you were going to automatically get a series of emails. Maybe it was 5 or 7 or 30 emails over a period of time to teach you a new skill, a habit, or lesson. We called them courses because, well, the marketing term that I heard for these was automated drip series. And I knew if I went to my colleagues at BuzzFeed and said, it would be great if we launched an automated drip series, they were going to say, that sounds like some sort of marketing stuff, and we don't do that, Dan. But if we give them a better name, if we brand it internally, courses, hey, we're going to teach you new stuff. We're going to use our knowledge to make our readers smarter. Well, that resonated really deeply with my colleagues at BuzzFeed. We did a bunch of those. They worked. I've worked with a number of publications on these. A few fun examples here that might resonate with you all. This one on the left is from a site in Tucson, Arizona. And they said, hey, lots of people are moving to our area. How do we get them up to speed on all things Tucson? Where to eat? What stuff to try in the outdoors, arts and culture, family-friendly activities, how to be civically involved. let's build a newsletter that guides you through the next steps if you're new to town. They've discovered this product is amazing at onboarding new readers and at getting a lot of them to become members and support their publication. The one on the right is from a site in Orange County, California. They said, we really want to launch some sort of gardening column, but we're not really sure how. We don't want to just start publishing this thing every week. We want to test it out first. So they came up with this idea of a pop-up newsletter, this course called Garden Party, that they ran in the spring and summer when tomatoes are in full bloom. I'm actually not sure if that's the right phrase. Bloom, someone dropped that in the comments for me, some sort of person who actually has a green thumb. Is it bloom? Ripening? Doesn't matter. We'll figure this out later. But when tomato plants are growing, and they said, okay, let's put out this product. It's going to last for a couple weeks. We'll get an expert in the community to teach you a lot about how to grow tomatoes in the area. And they were able to sign up a few thousand people, and it's launched and spawned all sorts of fun columns and work, and was another tool to get people into the funnel, get them to read, get them to engage, and then get them to ultimately sign up for another newsletter and maybe pay and support their organization. What I saw at BuzzFeed, and I see with so many orgs, these kind of short-run newsletters like courses, for the reader who is skeptical of newsletters, who says, look, I don't really want another newsletter, I don't like email. Okay, let's show you something short-run, something that has a finish and a start and an end date. So that way you can see that our stuff is really good. Some of the best emails I got at BuzzFeed were the ones from readers who said, I hate looking at my inbox and I don't like any newsletters, but I really like yours. If we could get them onto something and show them our newsletters were good, we weren't going to waste their time, we were going to deliver great stuff, we could often get them onto a secondary or tertiary newsletter. The other thing that's out there, a short run that could be fun to test, would be some sort of pop-up product. I love this example actually from the Toronto Star. They just did this, launched it a couple weeks ago, and I had to add it to my slides last minute. They launched this cookie calendar. It's basically an advent calendar where every day you get a different cookie recipe to cook around the holidays. Super fun, a way for them to showcase content from their archives, introduce new personalities, and it's the kind of thing they can bring back every year in December. New recipes, new things to try. Another fun example, the Philadelphia Inquirer does this around the Jersey Shore. A lot of folks from the Philly area go to the shore every year. So they have this pop-up newsletter. It runs every year, June, July, and August. It's a weekly product. They talk about what's happening at the beach that week. People sign up, they engage, and then they bring it back the next year. So it's a pop-up product, but it exists on kind of an annual schedule. It doesn't run all year long because people aren't so interested in going to the beach in December. They run it when summer's really happening. So there's different sorts of products you might want to think about launching. You also may want to think about stuff that you have to fix. A big one, I want to start here. It's super important because February 1st of this upcoming year, February 1st, 2024, Google, Gmail, and Yahoo have announced that as of that date, they want to see any publication that has a few thousand subscribers and sends daily, or if you just have 10,000 or 25 or 50,000 subscribers, basically if you have any sort of sizable list and you send on a regular basis, they want to see you do a couple things. One is set up these three forms of email authentication: SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. This is not going to be on the test later. SPF and DKIM basically are these digital signatures that say, hey, we are who we say we are. DMARC was created in tandem with the folks at eBay and PayPal about a decade ago who said it's great that we can say who we are, but other people try to spoof our domain. And if some scammer out there tries to send an email from an ebay.com email address, Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook, whoever, you should be able to stop them. You know who we are. You can see our signature. If it's not there, stop them. So this is really important. You have until February 1 to set these up. I just published an article on my website all around DMARC. You can go to inboxcollective.com and search for it there. You can email me afterwards. I'll send you the link. But make sure you have these three things set up. This is an example. If you go if you have Gmail, for instance, send yourself an email, click on the three little dots in the corner, click Show Original, and you'll see these options here. Here's an example from Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine. You can see the three options there: SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. They're all labeled pass. The options are only pass or fail. You can probably figure out what the good one is. Get this set up because Gmail and Yahoo have said if it's not set up by February 1 of next year, They will prevent brands that do not have these set up from reaching the inbox. Your emails may start going to spam or not being delivered at all. This is really, really important. And unlike the stuff that Google did with GA4 when they were rolling out the new version of Google Analytics, where there was this pop-up that appeared every time you logged into Google Analytics, there's been not a ton of warning about this. It's kind of just happening a little bit behind the scenes. If you haven't been following industry publications closely, you might have missed it. Really important, do this as soon as possible. If you're not sure how to do it, you can't find the article, email me, I will send resources. Really, really important. 2, check to see if your email is clipping. This is really just a Gmail sort of thing. It dates back to when Gmail was read mostly by people either on their desktop and email was slower, or on their phone, and phones weren't as fast. They said, hey, how do we make sure emails aren't too long? They set up this rule and said, hey, there's a certain amount of code that can be in your email. And if there's too much code, the email gets cut off. You get this message clipped sort of notification at the bottom. That's really big because if it gets cut off, the tracking pixel at the bottom of your newsletter that records opens and clicks doesn't fire correctly, and the tracking is off. And if people don't see the whole footer and they can't find the unsubscribe or update preferences link, they often just go to the top and mark your email as spam. Really, really bad. If your email is getting cut off, you might want to think about a redesign to try to get under that clipping limit. Something else that's really important, a welcome series. This is the first thing I do with any new client of mine. I want to tell you, often they'll have a welcome email, maybe 1, maybe 2. I always say, let's go a little bit further. Let's send a bunch of emails, because welcome emails drive super high opens at the start. They drive lots of clicks. They drive revenue, and early engagement helps you stay out of the spam folder. A couple different types of welcome emails that I recommend. One is what I call the Hallmark email, because it's kind of like the Hallmark greeting card of emails. The subject line usually says something like, hi, welcome, congrats, thanks for signing up for our newsletter. Here's what you're going to get. Here's what you can expect from us in your inbox every day or every week. You may want to send some sort of note from an editor, from a writer. Adjust this based on what you're doing. Love how the London Free Press does this. They have specific ones for certain newsletters. If you're on their hockey newsletter, Ryan, who's their hockey writer covering the OHL, talks about himself, his background. He played hockey. He played in this league. His dad played in the league. I remember when I was working with them on this email, we said, do you have any photos of yourself in uniform? And yeah, I have a ton of these. And so we have this photo of him as a kid playing, and people love this freaking thing because it feels personal, and you really get right away this person has a deep understanding of the topic they're covering. Some teams will also send some sort of meet the staff kind of writer. Hey, here's a few people on our team. We want you to get to know us as quickly as possible, understand that we're smart, we have expertise, you can trust us. These are great for relationship building. Maybe you want to have a small sort of ask at the bottom too, if you have a subscription or membership or donation strategy. Hey, now that you've learned a little about us, we want you to support the work. Don't make it the full thing, but you can include it there. Maybe you want to send out some sort of +1 email. Great. You're reading our work. You like our stuff. Fantastic. Let's get you to take one more step. So that could be signing up for more newsletters, downloading our podcast, following us on social. I love how the Trace, which covers gun violence in the US, they have a few different ones. You can send us a tip. You can meet our team. They include a few different things. Some teams like Vancouver is awesome. It's all around emails. Here's a few other newsletters that we have. Let's drive you to take a next step and sign up for more. It's a +1 because I want you to take one more step. You also may want to think about sending some sort of evergreen email. I always think about this. If I'm new to your site, if I'm new to your publication and I sign up, you have no idea what the content's going to be over the course of that first few weeks. So I want to make sure that they always see my best stuff in that first 2, 3, 4 weeks. Having an email that includes a few of your top performing stories, your best stories, that showcases your best work, is a great way for them to dive in right away and see what you're all about. And like this example on the left from Cal Matters, you can always include an ask at the bottom for them to support the work too, once they've seen what you're capable of and what kind of work that you do with their support. Of course, if you have some sort of subscription, membership, donation, ask them to support the work. You can offer a sale or deal. You can have a personal letter from an editor. Either of those tactics is fine. Make sure they know the next step. Make sure they know how to support you. You may also want to send out some sort of survey as part of this that goes out 30, 60, 90 days after they sign up. I have some examples at the end that we'll talk about around surveys and next steps there. All right, a few other things that I want you to try, particularly on the note of growth. Like I said, this is going to be a lot, but hopefully, as you all go through the slides later, you'll be able to revisit, go through all these again. I don't expect you all to go through the end of this and be like, all right, I got it all, we're good. You're going to have to go through these, lots to think about here. But the good news is lots to try and lots to improve. Growth. Newsletter sign-up pages. I just wrote a giant article about this on the Inbox Collective website, about 19 of my favorite examples. But briefly, these pages are super important because they're one of your best opportunities to convert readers to a newsletter subscriber. Show the newsletter. Tell people what it's all about. Tell them when they're going to get it. Maybe you want to link them out to a sample version of the newsletter. And give them a short URL that you can remember, like with my website, Inbox Collective, inboxcollective.com/newsletter, something I can recommend, something that I could remember quickly and recommend on a podcast or at an event. At the New Yorker, these were stuff like newyorker.com/humor newsletter. If one of our writers, our cartoonists, whoever, was out and they said, hey, you should sign up for our newsletter, they could remember really easily. Here's the link. Let's send you the page to sign up. If you have multiple newsletters, you can also create a main page where they can sign up for multiple newsletters on a single page. Love this Capital Daily example from Vancouver Island. They have a daily newsletter and then secondary newsletters you can sign up for with a single checkbox. Again, tell them what they're going to get, when they're going to get the product, maybe showcase the product. I'd also recommend something like using a CAPTCHA on the page. One of everyone's favorite, select how many buses, boats, whatever, those little checkbox things you have to do. They're really important because spam bots are sometimes just looking for comment forms to drop weird comments on, and they find a sign-up form and think it's a comment form and then drop email address after email address into here. Having CAPTCHA on there is a great way to protect those forms and keep them safe. A couple other simple things that you can do. Add a call to action to your header, to your nav, to your footer. Maybe you want to link out like Vancouver's Awesome does to your main newsletter sign-up page. Great. Maybe you want, as LAist does, to have a sign-up box for your main newsletter right in the footer. Fantastic. I found that those units convert at really high rates. They don't get as much traffic as other units, but they do convert really well. Maybe you just have a list of all your social icons, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. Add a newsletter icon in there too. No reason that you can't link out to that page. Story pages are super important. Anytime someone is reading a story of yours, you want to make sure we're driving them to go and take the next step of sign up for the newsletter. Have them at the bottom of stories, have them linked as a single sentence like Salt Lake Tribune does here. Interested in our food and drink newsletter? Sign up for Utah Eats. Great. These are super simple. They can drive people to the right pages, drive them to sign up. You may want to try pop-ups too. These, I will say, deployed incorrectly, can be really annoying for readers. So you want to think about optimizing first for reading experience, then for conversion. My general rule is don't show them on your homepage, show them on story pages only. Make sure you're not showing them on other pages. Like, nothing drives me crazier than when I'm trying to subscribe to a publication, pay, and I'm getting these pop-ups that say like sign up for our newsletter. Like, no, I'm actually trying to give you my credit card information right now. Like, get that form out of here. I just want to give you my money. And so make sure you're taking them off those sorts of pages and think about when you want to show them. Maybe it's something like, I want to show them people after they've been on our website for 30 seconds or a minute. Maybe you want to show them after someone's read multiple stories or scrolled 50 or 70% of the way down the page. A simple rule, go look at your analytics, see how long the average user spends on site, and try to back into a number. So for instance, if the average reader spends 2 minutes on your website, maybe we want to show these pop-ups to them after a minute or 90 seconds. You could also think about how big they need to be. Do you want to take over the whole screen or do something like what WBR does at the bottom, a little toaster unit that pops up like toast from a toaster at the bottom? You may want to try some experimentation with paid acquisition, spending money on places like Facebook. It pains me to say this part, but yeah, Facebook is still a pretty good place to test out ads and to acquire email subscribers. You can use tools like Zapier to connect Facebook to your email service provider so they go directly onto your email list as quickly as possible. You can expect, in terms of Canadian dollars, spend maybe $1 or $2 or $3 per email address. It depends on how specific the targeting is, how niche your audience is. If you haven't used it before, the Facebook ad library is an awesome place to steal ideas from other publishers. Like, I love what Ottawa Lookout, which is this indie sort of publication covering Ottawa, has been doing. You can go to the ad library, look up, what is Ottawa Lookout doing, see some examples, use it as a way to find formats and ideas for different sorts of ads you can test. A couple other things to try: contests, giveaways, best of, sweepstakes. Anytime you're doing one of these, you're already probably asking for an email address. Hey, you're voting on the best of Toronto? Fantastic. You're going to have to enter your email address. Can we get you to sign up for a related newsletter? These also don't need to wait for like a big best of sort of thing. It's a team that I work with in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts. They've done these on a regular basis. Simple things. Hey, who scoops the best ice cream sundae in our area? Who is the best apple cider donut? They did one around the Super Bowl last year. Who makes the best chicken wings? They got a couple hundred email signups out of this because people want to vote. You don't need to wait. And this is literally a Google form embedded on their website. Email address, vote on the winner, give us a sentence about why. Do you want to sign up for our newsletter? Check the box. A few other things. In terms of converting readers to supporters, subscribers, donors, members, whatever it is, think about a few different things. Try small nudges within the newsletter. Maybe it's a donate button with a heart. Maybe it's, this is Energetic City in Fort St. John, Canada, a team that I've worked with for a while. These little notes at the top of their newsletter. Before you get into the email, let's use that top note to nudge people to take the next step. A couple other examples. These are kind of the letter within the letter. I love when teams try these because they stand out. They look a little different. Add little call outs about different ways people can support your publication. Fantastic. You can also send one-off emails. Sometimes teams like to play with stuff like countdown clocks. Sometimes teams like to send letters. The Tyee in British Columbia does an awesome job with their letters. If you're not on their email list, sign up for their stuff and you'll get a lot of, especially this time of year because they're doing lots of fundraising. Lots of great examples there. Lovely folks. Personal letters, they make a connection and encourage you to take a next step. Fantastic. So many teams lean exclusively into the example on the left. Nothing wrong with what Philly does with those, sales deals offers, but it's helpful to mix in more personal letters as well. A friend of mine from the email space, Ann Hanley, likes to say when it comes to newsletters, a lot of people remember the news and forget about the letter. And you got to remember to have some sort of personal attention there. Whatever you're doing, just make sure there's some sort of voice in there. So many teams that I work with will take their messaging and will say, if I stripped away your logo, would you be able to tell this is your email, that it comes from you? The Baffler, which is kind of a lefty magazine in the US, does an awesome job with this. I don't recommend mimicking their style because their style is very wry and very sarcastic. Their voice is one where they can send an email that says, the brand team at Baffler HQ works 24/7 to craft urgent calls to action that will get you to subscribe. Like, only they can really do that. But make sure it sounds like you. It shouldn't sound like the CBC. It shouldn't sound like the Guardian. It shouldn't sound like the New Yorker. If it doesn't sound like you, if it's not in your voice, go back and give it another shot. One more thing to mention in terms of trying stuff. Newsletter advertising continues to be an underutilized thing for a lot of publishers. Think about native ads, maybe secondary sponsorships, job listings, event listings. You could use programmatic tools. There's plenty of them out there like Live Intent or Basendo or Jing. You could also do dedicated sends. Hey, as long as you have permission, on behalf of our third-party partners, here's something we recommend. But I love how teams mix these in. The Newsette, which is a US-based organization, daily news stuff. I love how they incorporate sponsors. This is Avocado Mattresses. They incorporate them into the header of their newsletter. That's awesome. Or this one at the bottom, this is from a newsletter in Annapolis, Maryland, the capital of Maryland. And they have these little sections within their newsletter that are sponsored. Here's some events, here's some classified ads. They bring them to the newsletter and they charge a couple $100 for these. Awesome. All right, on the note of testing, a few things that I want you to think about testing. This is something that you can do starting today. Easy thing to do, easy win coming out of this event. Think about the newsletter envelope. The envelope are the things they see before they open the newsletter. Readers see three things: the subject line, the pre-header or preview text, and who it's from, the sent from name. Now, you can see the pre-header text is maybe the one you're less familiar with. It's that little bit of gray text underneath the subject line. On desktop, it's often to the right on things like Gmail. These are really important. Readers only see three things to decide if they should open the newsletter. If you're not using all three, you're missing out. And so many organizations, when I look at their newsletter for something like the pre-header text, it just says, view in browser, or like images turned off, clicked here. It's a missed opportunity to tell readers a little more. So think about, do we want to go shorter or longer with our subject lines? Do we want to use the pre-header to tease more in that first story or maybe promote a second thing? Do you want to test out whether the email should come from an author's name, the brand name, or a combination of the two? These are all things to test and learn on to figure out what moves the needle and drives opens and engagement. You may want to play around with different sections or designs. Hey, we want to add an intro from an editor. We want to do polls within the newsletter. We want people to vote. We want to do trivia. This is Capital Daily again in Victoria. Great. They do these regular sorts of quizzes and games. People engage. It's a fun way to drive the next step. I love to when organizations actually ask questions of their audience. Such a great opportunity here. Oil spills, this in Edmonton. This was one that they came out with the other day. I'm sure there's some Oilers fans in the room who are less than pleased about how the season has gone. Hasn't been the McDavid-Draisaitl year, whatever, we're not going to get into that. But they asked, how are you feeling about the Oilers? They got a lot of replies, as you would imagine, and they incorporated that feedback into the newsletter, which is so awesome. It's a two-way conversation with their writers. People can hear how other folks feel around these topics. Awesome. Do more of that. You may want to test subscription messages. We shared some examples earlier. You want to focus on price and benefits, the value of your org. Try a combination of the two. This is from Crikey, a newsletter in a newsroom in Australia that does an awesome job with these different messages and trying lots of different stuff. Plus, you can always mix and match these sorts of things. You don't have to rely on just one message. Vary your asks, vary who you're sending these emails to. Is it just people on a specific newsletter, more engaged subscribers, people who donated a year ago? Figure out who you're messaging and send them the right sort of message. The last thing I want to get to today is surveys. Obviously, we've covered a lot of ground already. Growth, newsletter, products, different sorts of opportunities, monetization. There's a lot here already. I don't want to overwhelm you, but I do want to give you one more thing to think about before we go home. And that's why surveys are so important and how to utilize them. I am increasingly convinced that the organizations that do the best job with newsletters are also the organizations that do the best job with surveys. If you don't talk to your audience, if you're not listening to your audience, then how are you going to build a product that actually responds to their needs, to what they want on a regular basis? So when I do a survey, I always start with three basic questions. I always start with something numeric. Some teams will do the Net Promoter Score kind of question. If you do one of these, there's some tools that help you measure NPS, Net Promoter Score. It's this classic question. How likely are you to recommend our product, our newsletter, or organization to a friend or colleague on a scale of 1 to 10? The average for most newsrooms is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 25 to 30. There's some tools that can help you calculate NPS. If you do that, that's great. You could also do something simpler, though. I like to do these really simple ones, like on a scale of 1 to 4, how valuable is this newsletter to you? 1 to 4, because they can't be a 5. They have to tell me if they are a little more positive or a little more negative. They have to lean one way. I'm not sure what a 5 tells me. I always like to ask something about the value of the newsletter. I love this example from the flip side. They are a newsletter that's based in the US that says, look, everyone gets whatever news they get on whatever social media platform, but you're probably missing out on perspectives from other folks. So every day we're going to say, here's the big story, and we're going to bring you perspectives from the political left and right to help you kind of widen the aperture and learn a little bit more. Now, there's a lot of different reasons you might want a newsletter like that. And so they used a survey to ask, is it because you work in education and use it as a teaching tool? Are you the kind of person who wants to be able to debate your friends or family? Do you just want to have a better sense of what other people outside your orbit are talking about? They use the survey to understand what people are actually interested in. I'll come back to that thing in a second too, because I have one more thought on how to use that kind of sort of question. You may want to ask something open-ended. What do you love about our newsletter? Is there anything we can do to make it more valuable to you? If there's one thing you could improve about our newsletter, what would it be? Ask and see what readers tell you. If you get lots of feedback on a specific thing, it might be worth implementing. You may also want to ask additional questions beyond those three too. Those are the three I always ask, but on top of that, I like to ask around content, especially now if you're doing an end of the year survey. We're thinking about doing X, Y, and Z in the new year. Is that interesting to you? Would you want more of that in your inbox? Maybe you have a paid offering and you're trying to refine it. Hey, what might motivate you to take a next step and support our organization? Maybe you want to ask for information that could be useful on a media kit. We're going to advertisers and trying to get them to subscribe, but they want to know how much money our readers make, level of education, how old they are, where they live. Great, we can ask those sorts of questions. Some teams will even ask about the advertisers in their newsletter. Hey, were you more likely to buy a product this year as a result of something you saw in our email? Or I worked with one team that did a survey and realized that their audience, 80% of them said they had gone out and done something in the community that year directly as a result of what they'd read in the newsletter. Fantastic. They could go back to advertisers like restaurants or theater groups and say, look, our audience actually uses our newsletter to find stuff to do. This is fantastic. Get in front of an audience that's really engaged. You may also want to ask for a testimonial. And the reason for this, as opposed to just asking the open-ended question, is sometimes you get different answers, more thoughtful answers when you ask for something like, if you like our newsletter, would you mind describing why in a single sentence? People think of it as like writing the review for a movie poster. They put some thought into it, and you never know when you're going to get unusual sorts of answers. I did one of these. The one at the bottom is with the Anchorage Daily News. We had always focused all of our marketing efforts on people in Alaska. But from that survey question, from the testimonial, so many readers wrote back and said, I don't live in Alaska anymore. I grew up there. I've moved. But I really love the newsletter because it helps me stay in touch with what's happening in my community, in the place that I grew up in, even though I live far away. As a result of that, we did this really big marketing campaign on Facebook, targeted the people who had Alaska ties but no longer live there. Worked really well. It was a great way to grow the list. So maybe you want to ask for a testimonial. Maybe you want to ask for additional feedback. Hey, we'd love to call you. We'd love to get you on Zoom. We'd love to follow up over email with a few more questions. Go for it. If you're promoting this survey to folks on social media, on your website, on your podcast, ask them to sign up for your newsletter. I found for a lot of teams, if you're promoting this on your website, they answer a bunch of questions and there's an ask that says, do you want to sign up for our newsletter? Yeah, that reader who's super engaged is often really likely to take the next step. And then over time, you can use these surveys to refine and improve your messaging. So this is a great example. London Free Press again. They asked that job of the newsletter question, what do you rely on our weekender guide for? We weren't really sure what the answer was, but readers told us over and over again that it was this option, get the most out of living in London. So we went and updated all of the pop-ups and on-site messaging, our sign-up page to reflect what readers told us. So often people feel like they have to come up with the perfect marketing slogan. You don't. Use the survey to figure out why people love this thing, then go back and tell more readers, hey, sign up because this is the value here. This is the reason.
Thanks. We had some questions while you were talking about the changes that were coming in 2024. There were some questions about how to manage that within the email client that they're using. So Alan, first of all, Stacy asked, does the authentication thing happen on your website or in your email distribution tool?
Great question. And I'm going to drop the link to the chat too in a second. The authentication stuff, one, you want to go to your email service provider because some of the stuff like SPF and DKIM, they can help you set up. They're going to give you these little keys that you'll then plug into the back end of your website. DMARC is something you can do separately. I'm going to drop a link into the chat right now with instructions on all of that. It is really important, and it's all happening kind of at this. Gmail announced these changes with Yahoo the end of November and had like a 3-month window for people to implement this. A lot of the orgs that I work with haven't done it. I just dropped it in the chat for everybody. Talk to your ESP about SPF and DKIM. The demarker instructions are there. If you have questions, ping me, email me. We'll share my email address at the end. Please, please, please don't get to February 1 and be like, we didn't do it. Oh, let's see what happens. Because what's going to happen in February is when Gmail starts sending your emails to spam. That's where really, really, really bad things happen. So please, please do this sooner rather than later.
Yeah, the follow-up questions around that were sort of related, and I think you may have just answered that. But is this something that Constant Contact or MailChimp would do on your behalf? And you just said, do it in collaboration with.
Correct. Yeah, for something like MailChimp, for instance, there's a feature that they have where that's like set up your domain, and it talks you through the steps of setting up DKIM. And they handle SPF for you, DKIM, there's some instructions. They'll give you this little bit of code. You'll put it into the back end of your system, into your website. Basically, short answer is the email systems, when you get an email, are going to cross-reference the email address and place that it came from with looking at the back end of your website and go, oh, the keys match up. Okay, this thing is in here in the newsletter. It's in here on the website. Great, they align. Fantastic. This is a real email from whatever place that sent us the email.
Do you have on your website, or have you ever sat down and taken a look at what all of those service providers are and come out with a preference?
Which email service provider to use?
Yeah,
I did one earlier this year around some for independent writers. I haven't done one specifically for publishers. It's on my list of things to do. I like with everybody else. If someone can find a magic way to make even more time in the day so I can sit down and do more of these things, oh man, I would love that.
That's what Ringo sang about 8 days a week, right?
Yeah, I would love that.
Or actually, he didn't sing about it, but he was the one who came up with that expression. He coined that phrase. Stacy asks, how do you incentivize people to do these surveys?
So with surveys, a couple things. One is you may find, if you haven't done a lot of these, just asking your audience, hey, we'd love your feedback. It's going to help us make things better. The goal for any survey is if I can get 2 to 5% of my audience to respond, I'm really, really happy. So you may be able to just ask. Now, some teams will throw in some sort of kicker or incentive. For local teams, what I found is the more local the reward, the better. So for instance, I work with a team in St. Louis, Missouri, and they found that local gift cards to local restaurants work way better than offering someone, a $25 gift card to Amazon, for instance. And I've seen this with other teams as well. The more connected the reward, hey, we're going to give away 5 $50 gift cards to a local restaurant, random winner. If you complete the survey, that does often, offer some sort of positive incentive. I've also found for a lot of publishers, you often work with some of these people as well. You work with a restaurant group in the community. They already advertise with you. You may be able to go to them and say, we would love to extend your sponsorship. If you can give us a couple gift cards for free, we'll give them away to people who take the survey. And when we send out a dedicated email to our audience and say, hey, take our survey, 4 lucky winners will win a $50 gift card to X, Y, and Z restaurant. That's free advertising for them too. That extends their sponsorship. So you may even be able to get free stuff as well.
I think to tie it back to something we covered earlier in the year on SEO and Search Console, you could probably do like tiny little surveys to check whether people, do you eat ice cream in October? Yes, no, right? Because ice cream was something that is would actually, if you could write about it in a time that it wasn't trending high would boost your SEO. So maybe that's one of the ways to kind of get people to engage with content. People always eat ice cream. I can't imagine when they don't eat ice cream. Tom would like to know, for the courses you described, what were the trigger actions that you had in mind?
Oh, good question. So usually it's something simple like you create a landing page specifically for this and say, you want to sign up for our, whatever course, enter your email address here. Sometimes that trigger action might also be tied to something else. Like I work with a team at the Pew Research Center, and they've done a number of these where they do quizzes, these news quizzes around topics. Like they did a course a couple of years ago on the state of polling, political polling related to presidential elections, big national elections. How trustworthy are the polls? How does polling work in the modern age? And so there's a quiz they did on their website to test your knowledge around polling. And if you take the quiz and you get to the end of it and you find out that you didn't do that well, they nudge you to take the next step of signing up for the newsletter. They're not automatically putting you into the funnel to sign up. You have to actually go through the process. You have to opt in. But sometimes there's other kind of entry points like that, like a quiz or test your knowledge sort of thing. You might go, oh, I don't know as much about this as I thought, or I took some sort of action in advance that makes me likely to want to take this course. Fantastic. These were my responses to a survey. Let me go and sign up for the newsletter.
That's great. Thank you. I know you have some Canadian clients, so I know you know what's happening in Canada with relation to the algorithm and Canadian publishers being blocked on Facebook, and lots of people being scooped up that hadn't previously been considered news. So where previously we were like, yeah, we got a newsletter, to, oh my God, we got to really get our newsletter shit together right now. So I'm curious, setting goals for growth. What do you think about, like, where should we be setting our growth goals for 2024?
So there was some great research that came out a couple of years ago from the Google News Initiative that found that for local publishers, if you can convert 10% of your unique monthly visitors to newsletter subscribers, that makes you one of the best-in-class publishers. That's an unusually high growth rate that would require you to do a lot of good stuff. Yeah. Sign-up pages, landing pages, pop-ups, paid growth, a lot of things to convert folks. For you all, as you look towards 2024, it depends on where you're starting from, to be honest. For many of the orgs that I work with, because there's so much low-hanging fruit, we don't have a sign-up in our header. We don't have a good landing page. We're not running pop-ups. We've never tried paid acquisition. We've never done things like contests or giveaways. There's lots of things to try. You may have opportunities to grow a little bit faster than an org that says, we're doing a lot of these things, but we're just trying to get smarter. We're trying to make tweaks around the margins. It really does depend on where you're coming from. The other piece is it depends on how you monetize these. So a newsletter that monetizes exclusively through ads, I shared earlier the example of the Peak, that Canadian business newsletter. A newsletter that monetizes through ads needs to scale faster because you need scale and size in order to sell ads at the rate that make this profitable. Whereas an organization that monetizes through subscriptions or donations can be a lot smaller and raise a lot of money. I have an org that I work with in the US that has 4,000 people on their email list, and they'll do an end of the year fundraising campaign this year, and they'll raise $125,000 US. Like,
amazing.
There's a really good organization. They do awesome work. They target their audience, and they do a great job. They fundraise well in excess of most publishers at that kind of size, but like the connection between scale and revenue gets a little less important if you're monetizing through a subscription because, well, if you have a high price subscription, you don't need a ton of subscribers. You just need the right audience.
Yeah.
Some of it depends on where you're coming from.
I know that there are people on this webinar who would like to hear more from that publisher. So I'll get their name and look into maybe getting something together on their fundraising strategy for the new year. We do have a couple more questions, and I want to make sure I get to them. So Alicia asks, what do you see as the monetization opportunities for destination or course newsletters if the goal isn't primarily traffic driving?
Excellent question. It could be some sort of ad, affiliate revenue. CNN did a great one of these a couple years ago. They did an entire course on sleeping better, and they did it in partnership with their affiliate team that recommends products. Hey, every newsletter they recommended some stuff that you should go out and try. It could be advertising. That's a big thing for a lot of the destination products. It could be driving people to events. I shared the newsletter example from Puck. They do a lot of those sorts of things where people can pay for events. If you read us, if you like our expertise, hey, we're coming to your community. It could also be driving people to a subscription. So many of the destination products that are out there are actually subscriber-only products. Hey, it's a way to keep people engaged or an incentive to get someone to pay in the first place. You'll only get these insights in your inbox every week, every day, whatever it is, if you pay and subscribe. So it doesn't have to be traffic. You can find other sorts of ways to monetize.
Okay. And our last question that I see here is another one from Stacy. Have you found that there's an optimal number of newsletters to send each week? That's a good question.
I wish I had the answer, and I'd be like, it's 7. No, there really isn't. It depends on the audience. It depends on how much content you're producing. It depends on how big your team is. The general rule that I'll tell people is if you can prove that you can grow a newsletter, monetize a newsletter, and have the staff to sustainably produce the newsletter over and over again in perpetuity, you're allowed to have as many newsletters as you want, as long as you can grow, monetize, and sustain them. If you can't do those 3 things, then you think about how do we focus on a flagship product or a weekly product or whatever it is until you get to that level where you say, I think we have opportunities to grow, sustain, scale.
Thank you. Alicia snuck one more in under the wire there. She asks, what tool do you use to connect and identify the unique visitors to your website that are also your newsletter subscribers?
This is a more complicated one, and I'll say the simple thing is I usually just add UTMs to the end of links to try to track the overlap between those. There are tools out there that exist, like Blue Conic, to try to connect the dots that kind of get expensive. There's not a lot of great ones, to be honest. Some teams are more sophisticated. They have a CRM tool, whatever it is, but I wish I could tell you it's like, oh, there's a great out-of-the-box thing that just automatically connects the dots. It's not quite as easy as that, unfortunately.
Yeah.